Welcome back to the channel. We're gonna pick up where we left off last week. I'm gonna finish the fuel system on the Datsun. I'm gonna finish up the fuel tank, and then we're gonna get to the fuel lines. I didn't bore you guys with the process of decapping injectors like this. There you can see the exposed pintle. This is an LS truck injector. All you do is you set up a 4-inch grinder with a flap disc in the vise, and then you slowly grind away the pintle cap on here to leave the pintle exposed. And these injectors are 24 pounds an hour flow rate from the factory in like a factory 5.3 Silverado. When you decap them, they flow up to right around 750 cc or 75 pound injectors. So I'm gonna take the 8 that I've decapped here. One of them did not turn out quite as pretty as the others. And I'm gonna see if I can't make my own little injector test bench. See if I can't at least check these to make sure I don't have any leakers. So I'll get that set up and I'll see if I can't give it a try. So here is my genius way of testing fuel injectors. This is a decap fuel injector. I have a piece of air hose just slid right over the inlet end. I have a factory fuel injector connector wired up to a battery. I have a weed sprayer full of Radium chem tool. The hose is slipped over the outlet of that. Pump this up by hand, pull the knob here to pressurize this line, and then using the ground, trigger it on the battery here to get the injector to cycle. So all I'm looking for is that the injector doesn't leak when it's under pressure, and that, you know, after so long you test it a few times, it'll blow out all the shit in the injector. So I'm going to do this to all 8 injectors that I've decapped over there, and I'm going to arbitrarily pick the best 4 of them. As long as none of them leak, I'll pick 4 of them and we'll shove them in the car. So out of all 8 of those injectors, I got these 4 right here that are all really nice pencil spray pattern. Everything looks pretty nice. This one is also good, except for I ground it too far, so the little plastic pintle protector does not clip on anymore. Not a big deal. This will be a good one as a spare. 2 of these leaked, and the 8th one, whichever one that is, the solenoid was burnt out, so it didn't even fire. So I now have a set of injectors here. I think maybe I will get started assembling the fuel rail next. Now that we're finished with spraying fuel all over the place, I got 4 injectors that I'm mildly comfortable using, I guess, right? These are what they are. Wait a minute. Wait a sec, there's crud in this one. Crud in this one too? No. Here? Hold on a minute. All right, back to what I was doing before. So just real quick, back flush these one more time. Looks like everything is nice and clean, ready to go. This is the Radium fuel rail like I talked about before. I'm gonna get this all ready to assemble, and then we'll throw it on the car. So I'm using just a little bit of general assembly lubricant here, just so that there's a little something on the O-rings. And I'm talking like a very small amount, just so that these go together. Very nice. I don't want to tear those O-rings. Okay. So there is 4 injectors in there. So this Radium fuel rail has 3 -8 O-ring boss or -8 ORB inlets on it. And the one here in the center, on the bottom, I'm actually not going to use. So I ordered this fitting with this plug. This is just a -8 slim plug. That's all it is. So it's got a giant hex on it and an O-ring that matches here. Again, just a tiny bit of lubricant on the O-ring. I'm going to thread that one in on the bottom here. The fuel pressure regulator is going to go on one end of the rail, and the fuel inlet's going to go on the other end. I think next we'll test fit the fuel pressure regulator. So this is the fitting that is the genius part of the Radium direct mount fuel rail. This is a -8 O-ring to a -6 O-ring. I showed this before. So the dash 8 side goes into the fuel rail. So I believe it's going to mount like this. So this will go towards the back side. At least that's what I'm going to try first. Again, just a little lubricant on that O-ring. Okay, and this is a swivel fitting. All right, I think I understand. So I will have to take this back off just so that I can tighten it to both the fuel pressure regulator and the rail. Fitting you need, or sorry, size of this nut here is a 22. So you tighten that all the way down to the rail, and this pressure regulator can actually swivel on there. It's really, really nice for making this easy to install and to get fuel lines in and out. Here's another swivel -6 O-ring Boss return fitting. This goes into the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator, and then it allows you to swivel the line that comes in, you know, to pick up the return. So you can tighten that fitting all the way down to the pressure regulator, and then you still have the ability to swivel the return fitting. So there's the fuel rail with the direct mount adjustable pressure regulator. And there's actually 2 ports here for gauges. I think I'm going to plug both of those. I'm actually going to use this one here on the front. Let's go test fit it in the car. Probably the coolest thing about this top feed conversion fuel rail from Radium is these conversion spacer adapter things. This is a billet aluminum piece, has an O-ring on the outside, and these drop right into the factory location for the KA injectors. It's very satisfying. They look really, really nice. And of course you have to make sure all the radiums are pointing the same way for whatever reason. So here is the fuel rail assembled. These are the short heat isolation spacers. They sell a short and a long. They both come with this rail depending on the height of your injectors. I've lubed up all the injector O-rings, so those just drop right into the center bore of those beautiful machined aluminum adapters. You may actually need the long spacers. My bad. Alright, try again. Whoops. Try again with the tall spacers. Fuel pump came in. Thank you, Hunter. Came in really fast. So the rest of the tank here is almost ready to go. I got some fuel safe sealant so that I can actually finish installing the fuel pump. So first order of business, we'll get the fuel tank and pump all set up and ready to go. Then we can get that reinstalled and we'll work on fuel lines. All right, back over here at the table, we're gonna start putting fittings into the top hat here for the fuel pump hanger. So on the top of the fuel pump hanger, you'll see supply, return, and vent. Here are the 2 fittings that they supply you for the feed and return. Okay, this is a 90-degree fitting, screws in the top, and then it has a barb on the bottom. This right here, this is the rollover or the vent valve. So there's a barb on top. This is gonna drop through like that, screw in place. So per Tanks Inc. instructions, they want thread tape on the threads and then a little bit of fuel safe gasket maker, which is this stuff right here. It's called MotoSeal. It's by Permatex. This is rated to be fuel resistant silicone. So that's what I'm going to use for all of the fittings going in here, as well as sealing the top plate to the fuel tank. We're going to start mocking up the fuel pump now. And my box from HunterTuned finally showed, I shouldn't say finally, it showed up. He said he was going to be out of these, and then he turned around and shipped it like a day or 2 later. He's awesome. Here is the 450 pump right here. branded HunterTuned, love it. Okay, so this is an E85 rated 450 liter per hour pump, very nicely packaged. Here's all the stuff that comes with it. So here is, let's see, here's the filter. This goes on the bottom of the pump. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but there's actually a little post. And in the filter here, there's a little alignment hole. So this filter only goes on one way. And that's it. So I'm gonna mock this up outside of the tank so I can get all the measurements right. And then we will pull just the basket off and put it all back in there. So in the tank sink kit, there's a single stainless steel bolt and a lock nut. Those are for fastening the basket to the support bracket. So I'm gonna set the fuel pump aside for a second. Okay, all right, so got the fuel pump stuck in there, and I've trimmed the supply line and connected it to the supply fitting right here. I'm gonna do the same thing with the return hose. Now, the return hose is like rigid nylon, so I may have to actually heat this up so that it can fit over that barb, and I may also heat it up a little bit to kind of form it along the curve there. I actually don't think I'm gonna have to trim too much off of this. I'll get my heat gun out and we'll get this going. So here is what the fuel pump hanger and everything looks like assembled. Tank sink actually has these two really nice like compression fittings with an O-ring on them for the wiring to come out the top. That's pretty nice. So all I did with the Hellcat pump is I cut the wires off, the terminals off after the connector here, and then spliced it to the wires that came with the tank sink kit, which actually fit really nice and seal on these fittings right here. So let's see, getting a good idea. Here's the supply line right here, and then here's the return line right here. And again, the return line, I just heated it up and slipped it over the nipple. I doubt that that'll even need a clip on there, or I mean a clamp. So that is basically what it's gonna look like. I will trim these back, the flush cut pliers here, and then we can disassemble this and finish putting it in the tank. And that's what it looks like, all put together. So the only challenge is gonna be, I'm gonna have to bolt the basket on once this thing is threaded in the tank. That'll be kind of a little bit of a pain, but I think I'll get it started and then drop it the rest of the way in. I think that's just the way it's gonna have to be. All right, here's where this install is gonna get a little bit weird. They send one 2-inch screw with the tank sink module, and that's to thread through both the top hat and this reinforcing ring so that you can kind of get everything lined up. The only issue with that for me is I've also got to get this, I've also got to get the basket on the pump, and it has to fit through there as well. I think what I'm going to do is actually, I got that screw in there, I might actually put a piece of tape on that backing ring so that I can thread this through and then bolt in the basket or the little basin at the bottom. Then I can drop the whole thing through and I can slather everything with cement. Okay, as you could probably tell by that process, that was a big pain to get this all assembled and in there, but it's in, and I have a layer of fuel-safe silicone sealant on the top and bottom of the gasket, so sealing the gasket to the top hat and that reinforcement ring on the other side. So before any of this gets any further set up, I'm going to start threading in all the screws to pull this thing down tight. It is definitely a mess to get this all installed and happy, but holy shnikes. So after 20 or 30, let's call it an hour of messing with how all of this is going to fit in there, I got the fuel tank hat and everything all set down on on the tank. Everything's bolted in, everything is fastened. Here's the wiring sticking out the top. Just have to tighten these fittings down here to seal them off. So I have 2 fittings to go in for the supply and return, and then this is just a barb. I did put a little, well, might look excessive, but put a wide bead of that fuel safe silicone all the way around the outside of the hat, just to help where with any particular spot where maybe like over here, or maybe that gasket didn't seal 100%. Hopefully the sealer will fix the rest of that. So with that, I'm going to throw the fittings in here, and I think probably get to putting this back in the car. And we're back. The fuel tank is all set, ready to go. The sealant is dry, and I put the sending unit back in. I did test the sending unit with a meter. It does actually work, so I'm gonna reuse it. Let's see. One other thing I did while I was gone is, well, here, I'll show you. So I was getting ready to put the fuel tank back in, and real quick, right before I did that, I just cut out and welded in a brand new trunk floor under here. So I also did, you know, rear subframe and spare tire hanger and trunk floor supports and everything, all new now. Yep, that's right, took me about 15 minutes. So while those welds dry, I put the sending unit back in the tank over here. So I think I might fog this whole tank black. I might tape this off, tape off over here, give this a quick coat of paint, just so that any corrosion doesn't get any worse. So it's probably hard for you to see because someone was in here doing all this beautiful welding and fabricating, but if you look right here, let me move it this way. It's actually a piece of garden hose. It runs over to a fitting right here that kind of runs through the subframe, and then it comes back up and meets up with the gas filler. So I'm assuming that that's a vent of some sort, but there's also one here and one here. So there's like, and another one back here. So there's like 3 vents in this tank, and I'm not exactly sure what of the 3 that I need. So I'm gonna start by removing this piece of garden hose here. I mean, we may abandon this too if it's too hard to even get it off of there. Not sure what all this is for, so if anybody out there knows what all these fittings are for, feel free to. I have to cut that. All right, had to cut that piece out of there. That runs to a nipple right here, and there's 2 other ones that run straight through the subframe. Work on getting those out too. Good morning, good afternoon, it's the next day. The vent line on the top hat here is hooked up, and I will show you guys when this is bolted back in. You actually have clearance for this top hat. If you leave it right here, you can actually get your hands up in there and tighten the fuel lines. So I'm gonna splice on some more wire onto the fuel pump here. Actually, I'm gonna show you guys this close up. So on top of the fuel pump hanger here, this is the vent hose. This is 5/16 fuel line. Then I'm gonna cap off the existing fuel feed line because I'm not using it anymore. And then I bought some 5/8" heater hose for this connection, and this one is actually 1/2 inch, so I'll have to get some hose for that. And then I think what I'm gonna do is take the existing fuel line that I have over there on the table, the Teflon line, and I may cut it directly in half. And then make up the fittings and connect one side to each of this top hat here so that I can get the whole tank installed. Then I'll run the lines up to the front of the car, and hopefully 10 feet is enough to go from the tank all the way to the engine. The existing fuel line, or fuel feed, I just cut a little section of fuel hose, slipped it over the end of that. I'm gonna take whatever bolt this is, thread it in there, and then zip tie it. I would normally hose clamp this, but the hose clamps that I have, I need for other things. So just for a cap, I think this will work just fine. There you go. Put a zip tie on this side. We'll do the same thing on the barb coming out of the tank. And that should never come off. In my opinion, zip ties work really well for stuff like this. Or they work good as hose clamps, especially if you're in a pinch. But for anything like this, where you're just capping off an old port, a zip tie is gonna hold this just fine. You may think that I'm a hack for doing this, but I'm not so much of a heathen where I won't trim these zip tie tails nice and flush so that you don't sever an artery next time you reach up there. So what I like to use for wiring that has worked really well for me in the past is these non-insulated butt connectors. So this is, you can buy a pack of them on Amazon. That's what they look like. This is the same thing that's inside any heat shrink butt connector or anything like that. But it does allow you to make sure that you get a really solid crimp on those connections. And then what I'll do after that is I'll put a nice piece of heat shrink over each connection. I've had no problems with this. I wired the Oldsmobile this way. I wired a car previous to that this way. And I think I'm gonna stick with it here. It goes really fast and the connections, at least in my opinion, are reliable. Some people will say that this should probably be soldered and heat shrunk, but this is so much faster. So anyway, just a little tip on what I use to wire. Goes above this side and below that side. Interesting. So that it holds itself up there, huh? That's pretty cool. Okay. You know what? I have a stand that would help. Alright. Let that hold on to the tank for a second. Fitting this tank into the filler neck over here is really something to behold. Probably something I'm missing here. All right. Perfect-ish. Oh yeah. You can even get at all the fittings and stuff in here. Excellent. Okay, I'll show you guys. Okay, for those of you curious as to how one of these EFI top hats will fit, there's a good 2 to 3 inch gap, and even on top of the fittings here, if you can see up there, even on top of those fittings, there's an inch or so to the underside of the floor. So plenty of room for an EFI top hat to fit in here. And here's the vent line, there's the wiring in the front. Yeah, tons of room up there. So anybody who's looking at sinking one of these tanks units into your fuel tank, it'll work. So here's what I'm thinking for the fuel lines. Come out on top of the tank. We're gonna come right in front of this bracket, right here, the tank support bracket. Swing over to subframe here, come along, and then right here, which I think is technically the floorboard for the footwell of the rear seat. I'm thinking right here would be a pretty good spot for the fuel filter. Now, obviously, it's not going to be easy to service this thing on the side of the road if anything happens, but considering the size of this thing, I don't want to put this under the hood. So we'll wow. We will self-tapper the fuel filter in right here, and then we will run the fuel lines right along the inside of the subframe, at least one of them. The factory fuel line here runs on the outside. So I think that's what we'll do. We'll run one fuel line in here, and I'll self-tapper it to the inside of the frame rail all the way up. And I think that will be the feed. And we'll kind of come along here and tie it right to the floor or the kick panel here, or maybe the inside of the subframe, kind of maybe tuck it behind that clutch line there, and then run it up to the front that way. There's nothing hot on this side of the car, so this might be just fine as far as routing it this way. The fuel pressure regulator right there, that's going to be the return line. I think I'm going to follow it right down, and I'll have to find a way to get that return line to the outside of this subframe, and then run it all the way back kind of in the factory location of the feed. As unbelievable as you might think this is, I don't think 20 feet of fuel line is going to be enough to get from that engine all the way back to the tank for both feed and return. So I'm trying to decide what the best way to do this is. I'm going to mount the fuel filter first and then make that small section of line from the feed to the fuel filter, and then from the filter all the way up to the engine. And then if I do need to add any line or get some more line, I may do another section for the return. So yeah, unfortunately I was hoping that 20 feet would do it, but I don't think it will, considering I want to run all the way up to the engine in the front. I just don't think it's going to be enough. So I'll stop blabbering. I'm going to get that fuel filter mounted and then start mocking up some lines. So there's a ton of different tutorials on how to do AN lines, and especially Teflon braided ones. But if you don't know, here's like a straight fitting. All right, this comes apart and it's 3 pieces. Here's the fitting, the swivel part that actually connects to an AN fitting, and then there's a compression collar, and then here is the outer threaded sleeve which drives this compression collar. So that's kind of how it assembles right there. So these are a little different than standard AN lines in the sense that there's that compression collar which actually cinches down the Teflon line onto the barb or the nipple, I guess you could say, right here. It comes out of the fitting. So after you've cut your line, and in this case I'm going to use the factory cut end because it's really nice, take the sleeve, goes on the outside. That's why it's got a flare on it, to kind of make it easier to go over the stainless mesh. Slip that on first. All right, and then we're going to peel off the tape here so that that stainless braid can be expanded. And this stuff, the stainless mesh or the braid, is really, really good for poking holes in the tips of your fingers. So just be careful. A lot of folks will use masking tape or electrical tape. They'll put a piece of tape right where they need to cut, so it'll keep the nylon braid and the stainless braid all nice and tight so that it doesn't start to fray. Because any of you that have done AN lines and the stainless web or braid starts to fray, it can be a nightmare to get them tight and clean and sealed up. So I've got all of the tape off of there. This is the supplied tool that they give you. This tool is so that you can expand the Teflon inner sleeve right there so that it will actually go over the tool. What we need to do now is get this braid pulled back a little bit to expose some of that Teflon line, and we need to actually shove the compression collar over that exposed Teflon line. I might need to go get a screwdriver. All right, so with a screwdriver, as carefully as I can, try to spread the stainless braid around that Teflon line. So all I'm trying to do is open it up a little bit. And really we need enough for that compression collar to slip over it. So you're gonna have to move this back quite a bit. All right, so you see how I've got the stainless braid kind of pushed back, flared out a little bit? We just need enough of that exposed so that we can get the compression collar to slip over the inner tube, which is actually the Teflon part. And this is the very, very, very pokey part. All right, so now that I've got the braid pushed back, I slid the compression collar on, and this one's actually machined in such a way where the inner Teflon hose will bottom out in there. I don't know how well you guys will be able to see. This camera doesn't focus. Once that's on there, take your tool here, shove that in there to expand that inner hose just enough. Now we can shove the braided end in there, and here is where the magic actually happens. We're going to now bring the threaded outer sleeve all the way up, and we're going to tighten this down, which is going to cinch that compression collar around that Teflon line. So I'll go grab my Allen wrenches, we'll tighten this up quick. I guess I lied again. My dash 6 wrench is only good for tightening the fitting to another fitting itself. For actually tightening up the compression portions of this, I need two 19 millimeters, I guess. Okay. So I don't know if I discussed with you guys the new idea I had, but because I don't think I have quite enough fuel line, I'm going to do the entire feed side first, because I need that to all be perfect as far as holding pressure, minimal unions, minimal chances for stuff to leak. So that's what we're up to first. This is the first connection. I'm going to thread this onto the tank, and then we'll route the line over there and see where we have to cut it so that we can add the next fitting to get to the filter. Needed a quick intermission for some premium hydration. That's right, Capri Sun, feel free to sponsor me. Love these things. So here's kind of what the rest of the fuel system looks like mocked up. Here's the tank in there. Right up here, feed line wraps around the tank behind this bracket, comes over here, uses a couple factory hangers here, and then lands on the filter. And then out of the filter we go a 90, and then that line is pinned in along the inside of the subframe here, and then heads right up to the engine bay. This is the return line, and we are short, so I'm gonna need another few feet of this. I just order another 10-foot section, or maybe if I can get a 15-foot, that'd probably be enough. So I'll lower this down and show you guys what I did up front. All right, so from top side here, I've just got the one single fuel feed coming into a single 180 coming into the rail, and then there's the pressure regulator, and out the back of the pressure regulator there is a 45-degree fitting. And some day in the future when I have enough line, I'll get these all tied up nicely over here. But essentially that's where the fuel lines are going to come. So nothing is tied to the body over here. Everything's going to be tied to the firewall underneath. And I will make some hold downs here. I think I'll use this bolt right here and maybe that one back there to hold this down nice and straight. All right, that's going to do it for this week. Fuel system is roughly mocked up front to back. I do have to drop the tank, hook up the sending unit, and then blow out all the lines to make sure there's no crud in there. And then I order a little bit more line for the return side. Power tour is fast approaching. We have a ton of stuff left to do. I have everything I need. Well, I should have everything I need to wire this thing. I might be missing 1 or 2 connectors. The ECU is here, and then we're going to do the power side. I have to figure out where to stuff a battery as well. And after that, it's going to be mock up an exhaust really quick, and then get a drive shaft, and then figure out what to do with the rear brakes, and then an alignment, and etc., and blah blah blah. So much stuff to do. For those of you who have watched this far, thank you so much. If you have any questions about this fuel system, feel free to let me know. Again, thank you all so much for watching. We're at 667 subscribers as of today. Let's see if we can't make it to 1,000. Thanks a lot. See you in the next one.